Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's match preview. This week, we've got Wales versus South Africa down at the Principality Stadium. The world champions are in town, and my gosh, they've brought the side to come and beat us. So, as always, myself and Brandon from BS Rugby, we're going to go through the two teams now this evening, and we're going to have a little look at where we think this game could be won or lost, depending on the sides that both Jacques Nienaber and Wayne Pivac have picked. But before we get into it, Brandon, how are you doing, my friend? Have you had a good week?
Yeah, not too bad, not too bad. It's been a strange week, obviously, off the results against the All Blacks. Difficult to take, but looking forward to the game against the Springboks. Doesn't get much easier, though, does it?
No, it certainly doesn't. You know, the world champs are in town, coming off a sort of up and down rugby championship. You know, they suffered the 2 losses to Australia, and people were thinking, well, hang on, you know, what's going on here? But showed exactly what they were, coming back and beating the All Blacks in the final game of the Rugby Championship. But the one thing Wales have got on their side is a little bit of history. You know, South Africa haven't won in Cardiff since 2013 now. So just looking through the results, the first time that we beat South Africa in Cardiff was a 12-6 victory back in 2014. And all penalties are fair. And I remember being down there for that game thinking, wow, it was nail-biting rugby, but when the final whistle went, you couldn't actually believe you'd watched an hour and 20 minutes of rugby, but there was that. 2016, a rather depleted South African side came down to Cardiff, and we managed to walk away with that one, 27 points to 13, which was a much better performance for Wales. And that was at the period where Wales was sort of on the up, and you thought a big Southern Hemisphere scalp was exactly what they needed. Then in 2017, a very, very close affair, finishing 24-22 to Wales. I believe a late Justin Tipuric try really pushed that one up and over the boundaries. And then 2 wins over South Africa in 2018. We had the win out in the United States where we won 22 points to 20. And then the last Autumn International that was held at the Principality against South Africa was a 20-11 victory. So, Brandon, we have got history on our side. And you know, especially in times gone by, we have managed to pick up a good result against the Springboks. They did win a World Cup since then, but there's always that element of Cardiff on a Saturday afternoon to contend with.
Yeah, we do have a good history against them, actually. But I think we have to remember where the Springboks were at that time in terms of the quality of their squad and the transition they were going through. We also were certainly on the rise under Gatland, and we established ourselves as, you could say, one of the best teams in the world at points. But this Springbok team is a completely different side to the one that we'd have faced over the past few years. They are a different entity. They are world class, in my opinion, the second best team in the world. Surprisingly, the world rankings agree with me on that. And yeah, I think it's going to be a really tough test, but I'm excited for it. And as you said, Principality on a Saturday with hopefully a sellout is going to be an incredible atmosphere.
Yeah, it's a game I think so many people are looking forward to. And as you know, myself and you have alluded to in previous videos, it's one that Wales feel that they've got a target. Not so much as a win, you know, because I think, let's be realistic, you know, Saturday showed we've got a lot of holes in our game. But, you know, going into this game, the styles of South Africa suit us a little bit more. We like to kick the ball, as do they. But they do bring a massive forward game. So we're actually going to start this week looking at the South African team, seeing as we've talked about them a little bit first. So pop it up on the screen for you now. Wow, what a team. So starting with the front row, we've got Oxenche, Bongi Mbonambi and Trevor Niakane in the front row. A lock pairing of Lou Diaga and Eben Etzebeth. Lots of experience on their side, playing a lot of games together as of late. Sia Khaleesi captains the side from 6, along with Hwaga Smith at 7, and the big man, Dwayne Vermeulen, packs down at number 8. In the backline, no Faf de Klerk due to injury, so Herschel Jantjes steps in at 9 alongside Andre Pollard. The notorious Damien Dialende and Lacanyuam bulk out that central midfield partnership, leaving a back three of Mapimpi, Willemse and Jesse Creel, who comes back into the side after a long time out for different reasons on the wing. Leaving a bench then of Malcolm Marx, Stephen Kitsoff, Vincent Koch, Mostert, Jasper Wiese, Kobus Reinach, Elton Jantjes and Francois Steyn. How many World Cup winners are in that team? Oh, it's crazy. It's such a crazy team. What were your thoughts? Because they named it quite early. They named it on a Tuesday afternoon. So when you sent it to me, I know my message back to you straight away. I think it was a few emojis of hands over head time. But what was your initial reaction to that team?
Power, a lot of power in that team. There's a heck of a lot of power. I mean, that front row in itself is just absolutely ridiculous. The power in the midfield, and that's something we're also going to talk about later on, is contrasting midfields, but the power that they've got there. Interesting, no Cheslin Colby. I think that's a massive plus for us. Jesse Creel on the wings, an interesting one. I'm pretty sure he usually plays at the centre. He's quite a utility player, I guess. But yeah, it's an incredibly strong side, and there's depth on the bench as well.
Yeah, I got to be honest. I thought our first game on tour, perhaps they'll give a few players that maybe didn't get a game time that they would have liked during the Rugby Championship would have got a game out against us, considering that last week we didn't exactly show ourselves in the best light against New Zealand. But Jacques Ninaber has come out and said that we respect the Welsh. He's said in interviews before that Wales are a notoriously difficult side to plan and prepare for. And he said that this Saturday will be no different whatsoever. But yeah, like you mentioned, that front row there, the fact that you can interchange and bring a World Cup winning bench on is something that most teams dream of. You know, you've got basically two first-class front rows. You know, he calls them his bomb squad that come on usually around the 50, 60-minute mark, and they just cause havoc. And it's going to be a real tough ask for this Welsh side to be able to step up to the plate. But we've got faith in the boys that have been selected. They've been selected to do a job, and we're going to have a little run through the team now and just have a chat about what we've got. So, starting with the front row, Rhys Carey gets a start at loosehead, and this is something we are going to talk about a little bit later on. Ryan Elias retains the hooker jersey along with Thomas Francis in the front row. Alun Jones out due to injury, what looks like could be a lengthy layoff. So Will Rowlands takes up his opportunity in the second row alongside Adam Beard. In the back row, we lost Ross Moriarty just before half-time against New Zealand. So Ellis Jenkins returning to the fold in the Welsh setup and pulls on the 6th jersey. The rest of the back row remains unchanged with the incredible Tane Basham, who had a superb game against New Zealand on Saturday, next to his Dragons teammate and equally impressive against the All Blacks, in my opinion, Aaron Wainwright. The half-back pairing, Dan Biggar comes back in from his time at Northampton Saints to partner Thomas Williams. In the centres, Nick Tompkins also returns from Saracens to partner up with Jonathan Davis, who captains the side from 13. And the back three sees Josh Adams and Johnny McNichol retained, but Louis Rees-Zammit, the flyer, is back, and he's taken up that 14 jersey to complete the 15. On the bench, we've got Roberts, who stands to make his first cap. It'd be great if he can get on, but we'll talk about that a little bit later on as well. Wyn Jones drops down to the bench, along with Will Griff-John, who again stands to make his first appearance in a red jersey. Ben Carter of the Dragons is our second row replacement. Seb Davis, Gareth Davis, Gareth Anscombe, and Liam Williams make up the remainder of the bench. It's an interesting team, mate. What are your standout picks from that team that Pivac named this afternoon?
Yeah, there's quite a few interesting picks. We've got to mention the English-based players coming back, Louis Rees-Zammit, Nick Tompkins, and Dan Biggar back. There were concerns about Biggar, whether he'd be fit for this one. He went off injured last week for the Northampton Saints, but he's past fit. Louis Rees-Zammit comes back in, and rightly so, in my opinion. He's been incredible for Gloucester. And Nick Tompkins is an interesting one. For those in Wales who may not be watching the Gallagher Premiership, he's been outstanding this season for Saracens, absolutely incredible, and he steps back in. I have my concerns about the squad, which we'll get into shortly, but it's an interesting one. To me, the big thing that screams to me about this team, it's a little bit all over the place. That's the way that I would describe it. It doesn't really have a balance to it as much as I would like to have seen, but maybe Pivac knows something that we don't.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the forward pack is the one that screams it the most for me, because for me, the areas we seem to struggle with on Saturday against New Zealand in terms of our basics were our quality of line-out and also our ability to turn slow ball into fast ball. Now, for that reason alone, you would say that Pivac would have gone with some slightly bulkier forwards, some forwards that maybe are going to carry a lot more, which maybe is why Reece Carey has been brought in, because he does offer that explosiveness when he carries the ball, and he's given the ball in an opportunity to carry well. Other than that, Wainwright and Tane Basham, both very good carriers, both very high carrying stats within the United Rugby Championship. But when you look at the likes of South Africa and the players that they'll have coming through, Etzebeth, Mostert, Bombonambi, you've got Dwayne Vermeulen coming through. It's just player after player after player that can bring that game. But also then when it comes to the line-out, our line-out was particularly poor against New Zealand last week. So Rowlands and Adam Beard have got a big job to do. With the lack of the presence of Alan Wynne-Jones as well, Adam Beard is really going to have to step up as that sort of line-out captain and make sure that he's sensible with his calls. Because if there's anything South Africa are renowned for, it's their ability to read line-outs very, very early on into the game. The forwards are definitely going to be under scrutiny. I think we've got a back row that can go out there and win the ball. I think Ellis Jenkins' inclusion is thoroughly deserved. Since returning from injury, he's just been superb for Cardiff Rugby. He gets his head in there. He does the work that, not the players like him like to do. They like to be out and around the field looking for other opportunities. But he's not afraid to get his head in there. And the last time he played against South Africa, he did exactly the same and sort of mixed it up with them. But what I want to do, just have a quick chat. We talked about the backlines just now. I want to see what your opinions are on the two centres. So we've got probably the best centre partnership in the world for South Africa in Lukhanyo and Damien Dialende. And then against our side, we've got Nick Tompkins and Jonathan Davis. So you mentioned about Nick Tompkins just then, and I'm just looking at some of his stats early on. One of the best line break defenders in the Gallagher Premiership at the moment. He's got 20 defenders beaten so far, which is up there in the top 10. But also 9 offloads so far, which, we saw him a lot for the Dragons, struggling to get into that game that he likes to play. But with the quality of players Saracens have got, he really has flourished. But my question to you, Brandon, is where can Tompkins and Jonathan Davis try and exploit Am and DLND, or is it really just, to you, a confused pick in the midfield?
It's a tough question. To me, it's a little bit confused. I do think you have to reward form. I think that's very important to do that, and that's something that Pivac, in my opinion, hasn't done enough of. But yeah, I am a little bit concerned about that centre partnership. As you said, Tompkins has been really good for Saris this season. Jonathan Davis less so impressive for the Scarlets. I'm kind of concerned about the physicality in the midfield, but I do think something that we'd learned from the summer with the Lions tour is that you can't out South Africa. You can't do that. You can't out-muscle them. It's not possible. And maybe Pivac's looking at having a little bit more speed, a little bit more offensive players in that midfield. I do worry, though, when South Africa have the ball, they're going to target them too. Tompkins, when he played for Wales in the Six Nations or the Six Nations previously, showed that he did have some defensive frailties and that he could be targeted in that way. When you got someone like Damien Dialende, who is just such a powerhouse playing for Munster, I mean, he could run over him. And once they get that gain line, we'll talk about the scrum half in a second, but then you look at the back line and what they can do. I don't know. I think it's a little bit confused. Would I have thrown Jonathan Davis in there? Probably not. Tompkins, again, is a fantastic attacking centre, but you want your 12 to be very defensive-minded, to be very physical and strong. I'm not sure if he's the right man to do it, to be honest.
Yeah, it's difficult. I think centre is our one area at the moment where we're probably struggling a little bit. Halaholo will return from his isolation period on Friday, but obviously that means he'd have no time whatsoever to link up with the squad. So it was almost unfair to try and pick him. We've lost some other options, as times have gone on. It would have been great to call someone like a Jamie Roberts up in a game like this because he'd be able to solidify that defence. Jonathan Davis probably there for his leadership role. He's captain in the side, and if you take him out, there's not a great deal of leadership across that field. So maybe he's there to sort of galvanise the boys and try and lead them as best as possible. In the summer series, he was quite good at that in terms of expressing what he needed from his players around him. But we will wait and see how that pans out on Saturday. So we're going to look at some of the players to watch now and how we feel that they could have an impact on the game. So firstly, we've got the big man, number 8 on his jersey. We're going to look at the South Africans first, Duane Vermeulen. Now, recently signed for Ulster, which I think is a fantastic signing for the men in white. And I'm sure the guys over at the Ulster Roundup show, the White Walkers, they'll be absolutely all over this and very excited to see him arrive at the King's Pan. Big responsibility for this man. You know, he's had a lot of struggles as of late with his injuries, but he came back in the Rugby Championship and we saw some of what he could offer once again. Brandon, what do you think a player like Duane Vermeulen is going to bring to a game like this on Saturday?
He's a huge ball carrier, isn't he? He's absolutely massive. They're going to be looking to him to get them over the gain line and just get that front foot ball, really. He's such a big presence for them. And, I mean, you just look over the whole squad. They're all ball carriers, all very comfortable with ball in hand. But he is an exceptional player. I think last year he won World Player of the Year. I think it was last year, was it? I want to say it was last year that he won it. And rightly so. I mean, he was absolutely incredible as they went on and won the World Cup back in 2019. I think for Wales, we can't allow him to gather speed and get going. We've got to tackle him early. We've got to get over the ball. We've got to try and slow it down. But it's easier said than done. He's going to be a massive part of Saturday.
You know, you just getting over the fact you've had to deal with RD Surveyor for 80 minutes last week, and you get exactly the same thing again, a ball carrier that's going to cause so many problems up at that game line. And I think South Africa thrive off that. You know, they like to have their target setters to, you know, hit into midfield, set that platform for them. They do scan the pitch really well. And, you know, a lot of the time they resort to the kicking game. But like you said, when they've got a packed midfield like they have, you can see no problem whatsoever that they're going to unleash those backs and try and find the holes in the Welsh defence. But Duane Vermeulen, for me, is that link between the forwards and the backs. You know, Wales are going to be so concentrated on him to try and stop him at source, to stop that quick ball from being gathered. But also, he's got a nice pair of hands on him as well. And especially with the man that we're going to mention next, that could be the key to what unlocks this Welsh defence on Saturday. And the man we are going to talk about is Herschel Jantjies. Now, for those watching who are not entirely familiar with him, plays down for the Stormers in South Africa, and his brother's on the bench, if you noticed as we were going through. Big missing point for South Africa, obviously, is that Faf de Klerk is injured. He's had a hip operation and he's going to be out for some time. So between him and Cobus Reinach, they were fighting out for that 9 jersey. And they've given Jantjies the nod on Saturday. Now, we saw what Reinach can do at the World Cup. You know, he can go from coast to coast, try line to try line. But Jantjies, you know, watching him across the summer, South Africa are very confident bringing him on in those big games. You know, he came on against New Zealand. He came on in both the Australian games. He's got that kicking game, which we are so synonymous with the South Africans. Faf de Klerk, you know, he's probably the best box kicker in the world, and he relieves so much pressure. And Jantjies is probably the next best in that. But how do you think a player as elusive and as rapid as Jantjies could be Wales' downfall on Saturday, Brandon?
He's very quick around the breakdown, isn't he? He loves those sniping little runs. And as any good scrum half, he offers a fantastic support line to a player who's maybe breaking through and opening into open space. I think we've got to be very cautious around the breakdown. I worry a little bit about our front row, about our ability to move and our ability to be comfortable with ball in hand and our speed as well around the breakdown. And we saw that last week. Although different positions, RD Surveyor just came through them all. Came through the ruck. There was nobody covering that defensive line there. There was absolutely no one there. And for someone such as Jantjies, who is ridiculously quick, who has confidence just to go, tap and go maybe, or spots the gap, he'll go for it. And for him and Faf are completely different players, the way they play. Faf de Klerk maybe is more in your face, more aggressive, loves to get involved defensively. But Herschel Jantjies will really speed the game up. And if we're getting dragged into rucks because of the power of this South African team, then he will have the ability to spread the ball out quickly and there'll be space out wide. And if Pollard can play it out wide, it could be really difficult for us. I'm a huge fan of his. I think he's a fantastic player. He burst onto the scene a few years ago, and I think him against Thomas Williams is going to be an interesting battle because they both play quite a similar game. They're both quite attack-minded, so I think that battle's going to be really key on Saturday.
Well, absolutely, and I think what you just said last, not going off, very, very similar play style to Thomas Williams, which, for those that watch the URC week in, week out, he's got that rapid play off the base of the ruck. But, the question I wanted to ask before we move on to the Welsh boys is, do you think the inclusion of Jantjies as opposed to Faf de Klerk, who we know, like we've talked about that kicking game, we've talked about the fact that 99 times out of 100, they'll have a couple of hit-up rucks and Faf de Klerk is looking to box. Do you think they'll completely move away from that game plan? Or do you think Jantjies will fit in where Faf de Klerk has left and continue that game style that we've seen over the last few years?
I think South Africa will always be South African. I just think that's how they're always going to be. It's interesting that there's no Willie LaRue at fullback. He usually loves the up and under. And, if Faf de Klerk was looking for the box kick, someone like him would be challenging in the air for them. I still think that Jantjies is a good box kicker. He's obviously not the level of Faf. But I just think maybe that the game will be that little bit quicker. We see that quite often where Faf would wait at the base of the ruck for the forwards to set and then they go. Maybe Jantjies will just get the ball out straight away. So maybe there'll be a little bit more freedom in the play of the South Africans, but they're still a world-class side. So whichever style they play, I expect them to be very, very good, and it's going to be a real challenge for us. We knew quite a while ago that Faf wouldn't be available for this game, so it won't be big news to the Welsh boys. They'd have known that he's not going to be available. So hopefully they'd have been preparing all set to stop Jantjies.
Yeah, absolutely. And it all starts with that defensive setup that we have. We're going to talk about the Welsh boys now and a couple of the key players that we've got to watch out for. The first one, we've got to mention him just because of the fact that a lion has been dropped for his inclusion. Rhys Carré comes in at loose head. In my opinion, has made a very, very strong start to the season for Cardiff Rugby. Started off 2 years ago down at Cardiff Blues, as it were then, and really made a strong name for himself and was picked up by Saracens. Unfortunately, that time down there ended due to the financial misconduct that they were slapped with. So he came back to Cardiff Rugby. And since then, he's sort of been in and out of the Welsh squad. He's been in and out of the Welsh team. But he's been given his chance against probably the best pack of forwards on the planet at the moment. A lot of shade being thrown at him this week, and I think it's not deserved whatsoever. He's been having a really strong start for Cardiff Rugby. But what I wanted to talk to you about, Brandon, is they're up against potentially the best scrummaging team in the world. And Carré, up against Thomas Francis when Cardiff Rugby came down to the Ospreys, had a torrid time at loosehead against Thomas Francis. So for me, why do you think they've gone with Rhys Carré as opposed to Wyn Jones in this team?
Yeah, it's an interesting choice. Very, very interesting. I was surprised to see this. We did struggle in the scrum last week, although some of the decisions that went against us I felt were rather harsh and maybe not right, but that's just how the game goes sometimes. As you said, this team, the South African side, they are the best scrummaging team in the world. And something that we need to get is our platforms right. We have to get our platforms to be able to play the game that we want to play. Something that Pivac had at the Scottish was good scrum, good line outs, and then they had the backs to be able to go and play. As you said, Rhys Carré started really well for Cardiff Rugby this season after a tough time at Sarries. And I think, this autumn, for me personally, it's more about performance, developing players, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't. Although it's against a very good team, and maybe some people would say it's silly to try things out against a team with the quality of the Springboks. Now, 2 years out from the World Cup, now's the time. If you're going to try anything, now is the time to do that. Next Six Nations is too late. Next summer, too late. Next autumn, way too late. So it's now you're going to want to test things. And don't forget that Australia and Fiji are both in our Rugby World Cup group in 2023. So that will be like a dry run for those games. So I think Pivac will be taking them quite seriously. We'll be playing with the style and maybe the players that you'd expect to play in 2023. I think Rhys Carré deserves a chance. And to be honest, Wyn Jones didn't have his greatest game last week. I thought he was exceptional for us in the Six Nations and on the Lions tour before he got his injury, of course. So I think it is an interesting choice. I still expect us to struggle at the scrum, not because of Rhys Carré. I think there were other issues with our scrum. I'm not the biggest fan of Thomas Francis in the scrum. I think he struggles quite a bit there. But I mean, we've got to try and get a solid scrum. We just have to get the ball. We have to get the platform to play.
And that's the thing. Without that solid base and without that platform whatsoever, the likes of Thomas Williams, there's no point in having him in the team, because if he's on the back foot and he's constantly having to backtrack, to get clean ball, then we're always going to struggle. I think, for me, I want to put a positive spin on it. And for me, when I saw this, I thought, if Rhys Carey can come out of this game having a good 50, 60 minutes under his belt, come off with his head held high, that he's managed to hold his own against the world's best forward pack, what is that going to do for him? He's 23 years of age. That is going to have a massive impact on his confidence moving forward. And if he can, step up, Pivac would have said to him before the game, look, go out, empty the tank in 50 minutes, an hour. Just absolutely empty the tank. Be everywhere, do everything you're expected to do. If he can come out of that, having achieved those jobs, I think that he will push to be that front runner for the loose head for Wales going forward. And if not, he'll certainly be second in command, and he'll be pushing Wyn Jones all the way. But I think it's a big opportunity for him. I think he's got to step up to the plate. But I think based on what we've seen so far this season, I think he's more than capable of doing it and performing on the big stage. But to finish up, we've got to talk about him. He's back in the side, and we talk about performing on the highest level of all. There's nobody else that we can talk about other than Louis Rees-Zammit. He's back, played a few games for the Cherry and Whites this season, and he's absolutely tearing it apart. He's only played a few games, and he's already got 3 tries, 7 clean line breaks. We saw on the South African tour that he has got that other side to his game. He is very good under the high ball, which he's going to be tested on, especially early on in Cardiff. But if Pivac manages to develop that style during this game, where we have got space on the wide outside, Brandon, is there anybody else on the planet at the minute that you'd want than Louis Rees-Zammit in space?
Maybe Cheslin Colby, but he's not playing, so we're all right. But no, Louis Rees-Zammit, really, really exciting talent. He's still very young, we have to remember that. And he did speak quite a bit over the past few weeks about his time with the Lions, saying maybe that he was a little bit too young, wasn't quite ready for that level of rugby yet, wasn't quite mature enough. But I think he's actually got a really good rugby brain. I think he knows what he's doing. I think he knows where he needs to be on the pitch. He makes the right decisions. We saw it on the Six Nations with his try against Scotland, where he kicked it over the top, noticed the space, backed himself, and he's absolutely rapid. And against this potentially slower South African side, that could be a huge advantage. For me personally, the way we need to play, we have to throw the ball about. We're not going to match them physically. We're not strong enough to do that. We're going to have to throw the ball about. And so I do understand some of Pivac's selection with that. But as you said, really good form for Gloucester already. And you know what? Just give him the ball. Let him excite the crowd. The crowd needs something, especially after last Saturday. They need something to get behind. And I think if he gets the ball in hand, it's always exciting.
Yeah, and you've got to think that he's lining up opposite Jesse Creel, who, as you mentioned when I went through the site, not known for his ability to play on the wing. I think the majority of his caps for South Africa have come in the centre. So he hasn't played a lot in the South African setup for a while. He's been brought in on the wing. It's obvious, Jacques Naba, he knows exactly what he's doing. He's got the likes of Rassie Erasmus in the background as well. They're not going to pick players that they don't think can do a job. So Jesse Creel is going to be a formidable opponent. But I think Louis Rees-Zammit has got to take his chance here. He can turn players, and because of the pace he's got, if he can get in behind the defensive line, maybe, like a Scotland try all over again, but even if he can just get in behind that South African defence and get them on the back foot, then we've got a cavalry that can start coming through, start trying to penetrate that South African defence that has been watertight over the recent years. The fact that during the World Cup, they conceded the least amount of tries. No surprise they went on to win it. But their defence is so watertight. We played them in the semi-final of the 2019 World Cup, and we just could not break them down phase after phase after phase. So it's going to take something creative. It's going to take someone with a little bit of brilliance, maybe a damn big cross kick or something. It's going to need something like that to try and open these South Africans up, because if we try to one-up runners like we did against New Zealand, they'll laugh that off. They'll tackle us all day long. They'll pinch the ball. When you've got the likes of Khaleesi and Hwaga Smith who can get in and over that ball, it's a risky gameplay if we're going to try that again. But but Pivac's style could certainly suit Louis Rees-Zammit in a game like this. And I really hope that, it starts to come together a lot more and we start to see a lot more from the backs, because I think at times on Saturday, our pull-backs were with hands in pockets trying to wait for the ball. But he's got good players around him, an exciting back three with McNichol retained at fullback. I thought, I'll be honest, I thought that Liam Williams might have got the nod at fullback, but putting him on the bench is exactly the right thing to do. It's way, way too much to expect a player who's played no rugby since the summer to come in against the world champions and do a job. So I think that the back three has a nice balance to it. They're good in the air. They've got a really good kicking game between them. I think it promises for a good game. So just to finish up, Brandon, like we always do, score prediction, and how do you see this one going?
I think it'll be tight for the first 50, 60 minutes. I think there'll be a lot of penalties traded. Pollard's a very good goal kicker. Bigger's a very good goal kicker. I worry about our game plan. I'm still trying to work out what it is, and I worry that potentially South Africa could just bully us. I think it'll be a better performance. I think it'll be much closer scoreline. I think the South Africans will win by 10 points. I think it'll be something like 27-17, something like that. I think there'll be a few tries, lots of driving moors, lots of pushing over from 5 meters out. Maybe a Louis Rees-Zammit dazzling try, but I do think the Springboks are going to win this one.
Yeah, I think for Wales to stand any chance, we've got to score early. And not only have we got to score early, we've got to stop South Africa scoring early. We saw against New Zealand on the weekend, we started really brightly and things are thinking, here we go, let's see what Wales are going to do here. And then we throw an interception pass, and before you know it, we're 10 points down. And we're staring at, trying to chase the second best team in the world in terms of where they're at the moment, but in terms of the world rankings, they're first. But yeah, trying to chase in a game like that is never going to happen. And it's exactly the same with South Africa. I'm with you. I'm very, very apprehensive as to where this break is going to come through, where this backline are going to get the upper hand against South Africa. So from our side, I think it's going to be an all penalties affair and maybe the odd try, but I'm going to go 27-12 to South Africa. I think that's where I can see this one going. But let's hope for a better performance, at least from Wales on the weekend. Thank you ever so much for joining, Brandon. You've been a star again, as always. And make sure to head over to BS Rugby and hit that subscribe button. We are doing a review video again on Sunday, which had loads and loads of support. Lovely to see so many of your comments and your detailed, in-depth knowledge. Because trust me, we're just two guys that love Welsh rugby. So we try and give as fair an account as possible. But thank you ever so much for all the support lately. Forgot to say in the last video, we've just hit 110 subscribers now. So we're up and over that first big milestone. So thank you all for joining us on this early part of my journey on Rock and Roll Rugby. And carry on joining, like those videos, share it with your mates, and make sure that they subscribe as well. So have a good time on the weekend, guys. Enjoy the rugby, stay safe, and we'll see you for the review on Sunday.